What if I told you that a pinch of pepper once cost more than gold and that your grocery rack holds the ruins of the world's first global economy? Long before oil, data, or even money as we know it, tiny, fragile plant products grown in remote tropical islands rewired the planet. They launched empires, collapsed kingdoms, financed wars, and connected continents that had never heard of each other. But here's the mystery. If spices were so valuable that people crossed oceans and died for them, why did that system eventually break? And more unsettling we repeating the same economic mistakes today, just with different commodities. To answer that, we need to go back to a world where flavor meant power. For most of human history, spices weren't about taste. They were about survival, medicine, and status. Pepper preserved meat. Cinnamon and cloves were believed to cure disease. Nutmeg was thought to ward off plague. In a world without refrigeration or antibiotics, spices were essential technologies. Take catch. Almost all of them came from a very small region, the Spice Islands of Southeast Asia. Europe wanted spices desperately, but had no direct access. Middle Eastern and Indian traders controlled the routes, adding layers of middlemen and massive markups. By the time pepper reached Venice or Lisbon, its price could increase by 1,000%. That gap between where spices were grown and where they were consumed created something revolutionary. Long-distance trade networks fueled by credit, contracts, and risk. In other words, the financial skeleton of a global economy. And powerful people noticed. The earliest spice trade linked Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Arab traders mastered monsoon winds. Indian ports became hubs. Venetian merchants turned logistics into an art form, using early banking tools like bills of exchange to move value without moving gold. This wasn't just trade, it was systems thinking. Spices forced societies to solve problems of trust, distance, and delayed payment. That's why some historians argue the modern financial system didn't start with factories, but with cloves. Still, Europe remained a depender. And dependence breeds obsession. In the 15th century, Portugal made a radical decision: bypass the middlemen entirely. By sailing around Africa, they could reach the source directly. Vasco da Gama's voyage was just exploration. It was a hostile takeover of global trade. Soon after, the Dutch and British joined in. The Dutch East India Company, founded in 1602, became the world's first multinational corporation. It issued shares, paid dividends, and maintained private armies, all to control spices. At its peak, nutmeg was so valuable that the Dutch traded Manhattan to the British just to secure a single nutmeg island. Spices had become the engine of a fully global economic capital flowed across oceans. Prices in Europe depended on harvests in Asia, and corporate power rivaled governments. But systems built on extreme scarcity are fragile. To maintain profits, European companies enforced artificial scarcity. They burned spice trees, massacred local populations, and monopolized production. Short-term gains blinded them to long-term instability. Then came the collapse trigger. Diffusion. Spice plants were smuggled. Nutmeg trees were transplanted. Cloves spread to new regions. Once spices could be grown elsewhere, monopoly power vanished. Prices crashed. At the same time, violence, corruption, and overextension drained companies financially. The Dutch East India Company, once the richest corporation in history, collapsed. Under debt and mismanagement, the first global economy had hit its breaking point. European investors lost fortunes. Governments absorbed corporate debts, but the greatest cost was borne by colonized regens economies, distorted around single exports, societies destabilized, and wealth extracted rather than The spice trade didn't just fade. It left behind a pattern: boom, monopoly, exploitation, collapse. And despite centuries of warnings, the lesson didn't stick. After spices, the world repeated the model with sugar, cotton, rubber, oil, and now rare earth metals and data. Each time, the story rhymes. A critical resource, concentrated supply, massive profits, financial innovation. Then overreach. Attempts to regulate or diversify often came too late after damage was already locked in. The systems evolved, the behavior did. Today, over 70% of the world's rare earth processing happens in one country. A disruption can freeze entire indices from smartphones to electric vehicles. In 2021, Global supply chain shocks cost the world economy trillions. Just like spices, modern trade relies on fragile choke points, complex credit systems, and assumptions of stability. The first global economy wasn't destroyed by ignorance but by confidence that it couldn't fail. So what does the spice trade teach us? First, globalization didn't start with the internet. It started with flavor, finance, and fragile trust. Second, monopolies create efficiency, but they also plant the seeds of collapse. Third, when economic systems ignore human and ecological costs, instability is inevitable. The warning is clear. The more complex and global a system becomes, the more dangerous unchecked power and overconfidence are. The open question is this: are we building something resilient, or just the next spice trade with better branding? If this story changed how you see everyday products and global economics, like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden systems shaping our world. And ask yourself next time you reach for a spice rack, what invisible economy made this possible?